afternoon, guys, and welcome back to the Suburban Proletarian. My name's Greg. As you can see from my surroundings, autumn is upon us. It's the middle of October, and I have decided to conduct an experiment. I think I mentioned in a recent video that none of my knives really gets as much wear as a knife that would be carried every single day. I own a bunch of knives, it's the truth, and at any given point in time I probably have half a dozen or more knives in my EDC rotation. And I like to use knives. I work at a 600-acre site, which is largely woodland. I'm using knives every day, all day. But because I have quite a few and I like to change them up, none of them really gets beat up. And so I decided to conduct an experiment in which I would buy a brand new knife. And I don't know, maybe this was just an excuse to buy a new knife. Might have been. But buy a brand new knife, carry it every single day for 365 days straight. As I said, it's the middle of October. I'm planning on wrapping this project up Halloween of 2020. Of course, I won't be carrying just one knife every day. I'm going to continue to review knives, and I'm not going to stop my EDC rotation to do this project, but I am going to carry one particular knife every day. I'm going to use it for as many tasks as I possibly can over the course of every day, and unless I'm legally precluded from carrying a knife for some reason, if I go to a big city or something like that, I will have this knife in my pocket every day for the next 365 days, and I want to see how this knife holds up and how its condition evolves. Hopefully that's going to be interesting to some of you as well. So let's move inside and take a look at the knife I've selected. Alright guys, so here is the subject of my long-term testing project, and I have chosen the Kershaw model CQC-8K as designed by Emerson Knives. You can see the little Emerson knife design logo there and the Emerson skull. And I selected this particular knife for a couple of specific reasons. First of all, I have been fascinated with Emerson knives pretty much since the beginning, and the Ernest Emerson story, going all the way back to 1994 when Benchmade first started producing the original CQC-7 for Emerson. And as soon as the CQC-7 hit the market, it was an instant sensation. Its image was plastered everywhere. There were articles about it in every knife magazine and annual periodical that I read. There had certainly been tactical folding knives before the CQC-7, but the CQC-7 was seen to kind of redefine the concept of the folding tactical knife, and legend immediately started to swirl around the knife. There was not only the Navy SEAL connection, which I'm sure you're probably all familiar with already, but I also seem to recall reading that Emerson knives were issued to agencies like the Secret Service and other federal entities like the FBI's hostage rescue team. And either Emerson or maybe Benchmade managed to get some really premium product placement for the CQC-7 in some big budget action and thriller movies. And so, in the 1990s, it seemed like the Emerson was just about everywhere. But also in the mid-1990s, the CQC-7 was pretty expensive. If I remember correctly, it cost significantly more than $100, probably something like, I don't know, $125, which was... It doesn't seem like much today, but it was way out of my league in 1994. And today you can still buy an Emerson knife for less than $200, but that's still pretty much at the upper limits of what I'm willing to shell out for a knife. But even so, I've come pretty close to purchasing factory Emerson knives a couple of times, but I can never quite seem to bring myself to click that complete checkout button, and I always end up dumping my shopping cart at the last minute. And the reason for that is not just the price. It's also the fact that every time I've had the occasion to handle an Emerson-produced knife, I've always come away fairly unimpressed. I know that Emerson knives are not high-end custom knives, but they also never seem to have the fit and finish that I would expect from even a $200 factory knife. There always seem to be some unsightly gaps around the edges. The handle scales might be slightly misaligned. Too many machine marks for my taste. And I've seen some pretty rough, verging on splintery G10 around some of the drilled out lanyard holes and screw holes. And I just haven't been particularly impressed with actual Emerson-produced Emerson knives. And this is not an uncommon criticism of Emerson knives. A lot of people have said the same things, and I've read more than one discussion forum post from Ernest Emerson in which he, basically just completely dismisses these complaints, citing the fact that his knives are hard-use tools and not showpieces, and that, essentially folks who can't appreciate that fact should basically go buy their knives from someone else. And that certainly doesn't seem to have deterred sales at all. Emerson knives are still quite popular with a class of customer who is willing to spend $200 on a somewhat splintery knife with a too soft blade of rather unimpressive stainless steel. And Emerson claims to have produced several hundreds of thousands of knives, so somebody's buying them. And of course, some have gone to government contracts, but a lot of private sales also occur. But for me, the hard-use tool argument doesn't really wash too well. There are many hard-use knives from supposedly less exclusive manufacturers like Benchmade and Spyderco and Cold Steel that have nearly perfect levels of fit and finish, and are often available at a significantly lower cost than most Emerson knives. But nonetheless, I did imprint on the Emerson brand as an impressionable young person, and my fascination with Emerson continues to this day. And I have read the testimonials from satisfied customers. I've read reviews written by soldiers who have carried the same Emerson knife through multiple combat deployments and wouldn't have any other knife. And there is something to be said for that, I think. So somebody sees something in Emerson knives. I'm certainly fascinated. I have been for a long time, but never enough to buy an actual Emerson knife. So anyway, in 2014, as a result of all of that, probably no one was more excited than I was to learn that Emerson was teaming up with Kershaw to produce a collaborative line of budget-minded folding knives. And the budget-minded part of that equation is the second reason I chose this particular knife to do my long-term knife review with. As the Suburban Proletarian name suggests, I conceived of this channel originally as a platform to evaluate and review products that pretty much anyone could afford. And I know that over the past 2 years, I've reviewed at least a few products that have had not very proletarian price tags. That is true. But when I was planning this project, I set a budget of not more than $35 to purchase the knife that I would carry every day for a year. I know that this knife carries a ridiculous MSRP of close to $70, but it can absolutely be realistically purchased for less than $35. As a matter of fact, I paid, I think, $32.50 for this particular example to a reputable knife seller on eBay. And so even though I was initially excited about this collaborative effort between Kershaw and Emerson, it did take me another 5 years to actually purchase one of these knives. And it took the incentive of this project, or I used the incentive of this project as a reason to actually go ahead and buy one of these. The reason I hadn't bought one in the intervening 5 years is mostly due to the fact that while the knives do really tend to resemble their Emerson equivalents, at least in profile, they are very different in actual construction. Emerson factory knives are almost exclusively liner lock designs, as this one is. Pretty much every single one of them has dual G10 handle scales, as this one does. And most of their blades feature Emerson's distinctive chisel grind, flat on one side, ground on the other. But most of the Emerson-designed Kershaw produced knives, on the other hand, feature the kind of frame lock construction that is common to many Kershaws. They only have a single G10 handle scale, and the blades are ground in a much more common V-grind style that you'll find with most commercial knives. And really the only exception to that rule is the CQC-8K, which is a liner locker. It does have dual G10 handle scales, and it does have a chisel ground blade. And as a result, it ends up being the most Emerson-ish of the collaborative knives, but unfortunately it's also the ugliest of, in my opinion, of the collaborative knives. I don't really understand what's going on with this blade profile. It does have the standard thumb ramp with the wave opening feature, which does work quite well. I'm not going to demonstrate that. There's plenty of guys demonstrating waving open knives here on YouTube. This little ramp here I don't really understand, and the associated jimping. I suppose that's so that you can get purchase with your index finger if you're cutting downward, slicing perhaps. Not really sure, but the angular lines of the knife have been quite criticized. Although the back is very organic and fits well in the hand. The knife actually feels pretty good in the hand, but I'm not the only one who's criticized the styling of this knife. But as a result, I do feel that it is the ugliest and least appealing to me of the Kershaw Emerson collaborations. But maybe it'll grow on me. Maybe that's one of the things that'll come out of this long-term experiment. I don't know. According to my postal scale, it weighs about 5.4 ounces. The blade length is just about exactly 3.5 inches. The overall length from tip to tip is just about exactly 8 inches, and the close length is just about 4.75 inches, 4 3/4 inches from this point to this point. So it's definitely very much an EDC size knife. At 5.4 ounces, not terribly heavy. The one-handed opening feature, instead of a stud or a hole, they feature Emerson's fairly standard disc. And the knife is quite stiff. It's not really a flipper. You're not going to flick this. Well, I guess you can flick it open, but I find with these discs, it's easier to just open them in the old-fashioned style. Overall, so far, it looks like a pretty decent knife. The G10, despite the fact that this is made in China, looks a lot nicer than the G10 I've seen on any Emerson knives. It is a liner lock. Emerson knives feature one stainless steel liner on the off side, as this one has. The liner that incorporates the lock on actual Emerson's is made from titanium. Both of these are stainless steel. The blade centering is quite good. It might be kind of hard to pick it up on the camera because of this asymmetrical blade grind, but believe me, it's not touching either side, so the centering is perfectly fine. Most Emerson knives produced today have open sort of flow-through pillar construction. They've got pillars all across the back here. Older Emerson knives had a spacer, kind of like this, but the spacer on the Emerson knives was, I believe, made from aluminum. This one's from glass reinforced nylon. The black blade, Kershaw claims that it is black oxide coated. Now, Emerson, their black knives are supposedly Cerakoted. Previously, they'd advertised their black bladed knives as being Teflon coated. This is at least supposed to be black oxide, and it clearly does have some sort of a finish on the top here, which has caused some people to claim that it's just black paint. I'm not convinced of that. A lot of military firearms and knives in the past were finished with black oxide, particularly those produced in the UK and Belgium. They were finished in black oxide and then coated over top with a sort of enamel. And while this definitely has enamel on top of it, I'm not sure that black oxide isn't underneath. As a matter of fact, on the pocket clip, you can see the enamel starting to wear a bit. I have been carrying this knife for about a week already, although I haven't used it much. But the enamel is starting to wear around the edges of the pocket clip, and I am not seeing bright, shiny stainless steel in there. I'm seeing sort of a gray finish. So the knife and the clip may in fact be black oxide, but they do definitely have some sort of enamel over the top. The hardware, in true Emerson fashion, you've got a flat-headed screw for the pivot pin to retain the pivot pin, and instead of Torx drive screws to hold the handle scales and the liners and the spacer together, you've got Phillips drive screws, which is a very Emerson-y feature. Ernest Emerson claims that he does that on his knives so that if you needed a replacement screw, you could get it at the hardware store. And also, if you needed to disassemble the knife, you can do that using commonly available tools that you can find in most workshops or houses. I don't know that this is the best system for putting a knife together. I don't have a great history with Phillips drive screws, but I have had this knife apart and I managed to put it back together without buggering up any of the heads. So far so good. So I just want to talk about the parameters of this test a little bit. The knife looks pretty good. As I already stated, I intend to carry this knife every day for the next 12 months. It is today, October the 17th, 2019. So let's set a date of Halloween 2020 when we will conclude this experiment, at least potentially. Maybe I'll decide to extend it, I don't know. And generally my practice, I work as a maintenance man. My general practice is if I come up against a task that I could do with the knife I'm carrying, but it would probably be better done with some different tool, I will go and get the correct tool for the job. My plan with this knife is, because I really want to see what it can take, if I think that I can accomplish the task using the knife, I will forego getting the specialized tool and I will do it with this knife. Nothing too abusive. I'm not going to be prying paint can lids or something off. But I will use this knife for every task possible. And finally, I want to say that in all of my upcoming knife videos and maybe even watch videos and maybe even shooting videos over on our companion channel, The Suburban Rifleman, I will give updates, a 10-15 second update on this knife in each of those videos so you can kind of see how it's wearing. I don't know if this experiment's going to be interesting to anyone except me, but we're going to do it. Those are the parameters I've set forth, and starting today, October 17th, 2019, I will be carrying this knife and using it as much as humanly possible every single day for the next 12 months, and we'll see how it goes. So this is already way too long, so let's go wrap it up. Okay, so I hope some of you will be interested, as I will be, to see the results of this project, how this knife holds up and how it evolves over the next 12 months. I will be putting the Kershaw CQC-8K through its paces. I'm not going to be pulling any punches, and I'm really going to work this knife out as best I can. I'll try to work in a little bit of video footage of that work being performed. And as I said, I will incorporate the knife into every video I do over the next 12 months, just for 10 or 15 seconds to take a look and see how it's holding up. Of course, if I have a catastrophic failure or something at some point in time, I will cover that as well. One thing I did fail to talk about in the tabletop segment of this video was the knife steel that's being used here. Kershaw, it's not marked on the knife, but Kershaw has stated that all of their knives are using 8CR14 MOV. I don't have any experience with 8CR14 MOV. I have a lot of experience, as most of you probably do, with 8CR13 MOV. I don't really know what the difference is between 13 and 14. I think 8CR14 MOV is a slight upgrade over 13, but both of those steels are very similar to AUS 8. And while AUS 8 is a Japanese steel with somewhat better purity, probably a little bit finer carbide structure than 8CR14 MOV, Kershaw has received awards for its heat treatment of some of these Chinese alphabet steels. I know 8CR13 MOV, certainly. I can't imagine that 8CR14 is all that different. So anyway, I will be giving regular updates on the knife, and I hope to see you here when I do that. Please remember to subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. Like the video. If you hated it, hate the video. And of course, always share, tell your friends. And when I post new content to the channel, I hope to see each of you here at that time. Later, guys.